Welcome everyone to the F6P NL. Okay, already flubbing Joe. F6P NFL DFS kickoff show. We are live on Fantasy Six Packs YouTube channel. Each week we will be going live at this time, leading right into the Thursday night football game, giving you our favorite median and bargain tier value plays for DFS for that week. I am your host, Keith Flemming, joined as always by my good friend, Joe the Brain Matz. Joe, how excited are you that we are this close? Like just maybe 45 minutes, an hour from NFL being back?
Very excited. This is the rare over the last, probably most of our lives, honestly, that both of us have reason to be optimistic about our actual football teams this year. Normally, at least one of us is feeling pretty depressed, so that's exciting.
Let's not start off that way. How many Super Bowls have you won since 2007? Two? What have my Falcons done? And the one Super Bowl they went to, we don't have to get into that.
It's all relative. Some of us beat Tom Brady, and some of us have our souls crushed by Tom Brady. It's just the way of the world.
It's fair. And again, I always tell people Falcons fans are never really optimistic. We're cautiously optimistic.
Still wish we would have taken. That's the way to be.
That's fair. I still wish we would have taken Jalen Carter, but that's another thing.
Yeah. I do as well as a Giants fan. So
I bet you do. Just a little bit about me and Joe real quickly before we get into it. Because again, what we do each week, we're not going to give you expensive tier plays. We did that before. If you followed us at some of our previous sites, we would do expensive, median, and value. You should know who expensive players are. To be honest, the only thing I always recommend to people is with the expensive one. If it's probably a top 5 defense versus that position, I might steer away. Other than that, you know what you're getting with the McCaffreys and those guys. So we're not going to waste time on that. But I do want to just say that our goal week in and week out, and this is what we can guarantee you, is we're going to provide enough logic, data, reasoning with all of our plays that are backed up with real data, that even if they don't work, I think we made a legit case to why they would. And just a reminder that no one knows what's going to happen in fantasy. It's hilarious to see people in the fantasy football community, the DFS community. Nobody knows. Especially right now, nobody has any idea what's going to happen this season. Yeah, we might have, educated guesses, but that's about it, right, Joe?
Yeah, that's the beauty. It's the scary part, but also the exciting part is if you guess right on a player, or, if you're doing normal gambling, just right on a team early in the season, this is where you can really hit. Because if you're
look really smart.
A guy, we're going to give our picks that are mostly guys in the 5,000 range today. And if those guys go off and they end up having great seasons, then right now is the time that they're really going to pay out. Because eventually the pricing catches early on, you probably made out well. And by the end of the year, though, those guys are costing you $6,700, and they're more normal values compared to everyone else. Or if you hit that Justin Fields upturn at the right moment, you were crushing it. But then eventually he cost $7,400, and it was like, well, I think I'd rather have Lamar Jackson.
We were still pounding him, though.
Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, you didn't necessarily start losing because you picked them, but they stopped being the primary reason you won as on a consistent basis. Because when you can get a guy who gives you 25 points and he costs you $5K, you have so much to work with. Whereas, once they're in that upper echelon, they can still work out. But again, there's a reason we don't give the high tier plays, because, you should be able to guess that when a guy has scored 25 points 4 straight weeks, that he's good.
Yeah, and the money's made in that, again, median and low tier. But all right, we're going to get right into it. But before we do, just want to remind everyone, you can become an all-access member at Fantasy Six Pack. In doing so, you get all the great tools, rankings, access to their Discord, and much more. You can use the promo code F6PNFL and get 15% off. You should definitely do that. Joe, let's start with the QBs. Do you want to go first, or would you like me to?
You lead us off.
Oh, man.
I like your picks, too.
Get fired up right off the bat. All right, let's start with Kirk
absolutely.
Cousins, who is my median quarterback this week, 6,300 versus Tampa at home. There is significant data about Kirk Cousins to back up this play. He is a monster indoors and an average QB outdoor. Last year, scored 21 points per game in indoor games, just over 15 in outdoor. What's insane about that 21-point number, that includes a 3.2-point performance versus Dallas. So you take that away, it's almost 23 points, and now he's in the top 5, 6 QB range on DraftKings in points per games last year for the quarterbacks. And again, he just monster indoors. Scored 18 or more points in 9 of 12 indoor games last year, 22 points or more in 7 of 12. And then he gets, again, this data is from last year. A lot can change from one year to the
most
next.
of it is going to be right now.
Right. So, but it still doesn't mean that I didn't look at it. And this is another prime example. Tampa gave up the second most passing touchdowns in the league last year. Also, don't be afraid to stack Cousins with Jefferson, who, by the way, had 7 games of 32 points or more indoors with Kirk Cousins last year. They're just monsters indoors. I think the Vikings get off to a very fast start. I love Cousins. Definitely love stacking him with Jeff. I think if you're going to play Cousins, put him with Jefferson. But if you want to go a cheaper option, you could go Addison. You could go, Hawkinson. But I feel very good about that play. And I think he's a little underpriced, again, when he's averaging over 21 points per game indoors last year in 12 games, too. It wasn't like it was just a half-game sample size, 8 or 9 games.
Yeah, I like that one. I will say I'm down on them as a team this year, but I almost think that maybe that works out for the passing game just because they might throw it even more this year. They threw it a lot last season. I'm going to go with someone who was super unsuccessful last season and disappointed everyone, and that's Russell Wilson. Literally, I think his own family was disappointed. Like, Sierra would never say it publicly, but she was probably disappointed. Russell Wilson, 5,900 against the Las Vegas Raiders. To me, the biggest thing is Paul Hackett is gone. And just look at last year where you looked at who were the 2 worst coach teams in 2021. It's the Jacksonville Jaguars with Urban Meyer. It's my New York Giants with Joe Judge. And then the next season, they get taken over by Doug Peterson, former Super Bowl winning head coach. He's running the offense. Trevor Lawrence takes off. New York Giants, Brian Daboll, national championship winning offensive coordinator at Alabama, super successful with Josh Allen. He takes over. Oh, Daniel Jones. I know there's the 15 touchdown passes that everyone went on ad nauseum about because of the contract, but 700 rushing yards, best offense the Giants have had in years. So now we're going from Paul Hackett, who by week 2, we all knew was a disaster. That's how bad he was. To Sean Payton, Super Bowl winning head coach. And I think, sometimes people want to downplay Payton, because I had Drew Brees all those years. Drew Brees those last couple of years couldn't throw a ball more than 30 yards downfield, and it was a top 10 offense. And then he made Taysom Hill somehow relevant. So this is an offensive genius. If he succeeds at all with the Broncos, he's going to be a Hall of Famer if he's not already. Taking over with Russell Wilson, who 20 threw 40 touchdowns. It's not that long ago. He's 34. He's not ancient. And also, the 2, not even with Sean Payton, Paul Hackett just gone. Last 2 games of the season last year, Russell Wilson scores over 24 points, has 6 total touchdowns in those 2 games. So just Hackett being gone and being replaced with just average coaches, huge improvement. Then you throw in, what was his best game of the season last year? 27 points on DraftKings. Week 4 against these Raiders. Vegas, 27th in yards per attempt allowed last year, 30th in completion percentage and sacks. Max Crosby's the only guy getting pressure on this team. They had 6 interceptions all of last season. That tied for last place. Off-season, PFF always does their rankings of the different portions of each team. They rank the Raiders as the 30th best secondary. So this is not a team where you're like, oh, they were bad last year, but they had a ton of talent. That didn't happen. This is relatively the same team, no real improvements, same defensive coordinator. And then the only thing that gives me any pause here is that I would have loved if Jerry Jeudy was ready to go, because I was all ready to draft him in like every league I had.
As I say, you and a bunch of other fantasy owners.
Yeah, I drafted him in one league, and then my next league I was about to take him, and the day before is when he got hurt. But as we'll get to down the line with our picks, I think there's some advantages to Jerry Jeudy being gone. But yeah, overall, I got Russell Wilson under 6,000 against, I think, a bottom 5 pass defense, and now he's got a Hall of Fame head coach calling the plays. Sign me up.
Yeah, and he's got that revenge bod going. You know, Joey lost 15 pounds in the
lost
season.
Yeah, I heard.
Yeah, so
let's get some more rushing yards, Russ. Let's get those back.
Have him doing something. Next up, we got Derek Carr. He is my bargain tier play for the quarterback position, playing Tennessee. We hammered the Tennessee secondary last year, Joe, to much success. I mean, pretty much from about week 3, week 4 on. They gave up the second most passing touchdowns in the league, third and most first downs allowed for passing plays. And this one is just insane. They led the league in passing yards allowed, over 500 yards more than 30 of the 32 teams in the NFL. That is hard to do, to be that bad that you and one other team is basically – they were almost 400 yards in front of the second-place team. And then – so I think it's a good matchup. You talk about all the time, it's hard for a secondary to sort of get remade in 1 year, right? It's a lot easier to kind of figure out a run defense that maybe struggles the year before and be a lot better the next year. It's really hard to figure out how to defend the pass. And then I just think that Carr, with all these weapons, is really interesting, especially Olave, who we'll get into in just a little bit. But the stat that you gave me a little bit earlier, I keep saying it because it just blows my mind, that Carr with Devontae Adams last year hooked up for 8 touchdowns of 30 yards or more. That equated to the same amount as him and Aaron Rodgers had over 8 seasons. And now you're putting Carr with Olave, who has a rookie 8th in air yards, 3rd in air yard share, arguably already one of the top 2 or 3 best deep threats in the league, was top 15 in win rate on routes. I just think Carr at home, that place is going to be rocking. You know, the Saints they've been a little down the last couple of years. I think they're really excited about their team. They should be. They got an easy schedule. I think Carr just shreds Tennessee. And I got an article coming up tomorrow on Fantasy Six Pack for my favorite stacks for the week. My triple stack this week was Carr, Olave, Michael Thomas. I think they're going to go off on Tennessee.
No, I absolutely love this pick. I always try to pick all my guys before I look at the list that you've compiled, that you share with me. And I was going back and forth on 2 QBs for my bargain tier. And then I was like, cool, Keith took one of them. I can just pick the other guy, because I am very much in on the Carr Olave connection. I mean, in general, but especially this week against our old friends, Tennessee. I went even cheaper, 4,900. Sam Howell versus Arizona. I'll admit, I'm not the biggest believer in Sam Howell.
I am.
I think there's I'm not a huge believer in actual football. In fantasy, I could definitely buy in. His one game starting last year, played the Cowboys week 18. I don't remember specifically. I don't think the Cowboys had all their starters in for that game, because I think, if I remember right,
it was second string defense.
Yeah. So he had 19.3 points, though. So he at least put up a reasonable showing in that game. I believe he ran for and passed for a touchdown. And that's, I think, the key is he ran for over 1,000 yards his last year at North Carolina. So this is a guy with wheels. I know I can't remember whose comp it was, but I was looking through some of the old college comps that people put out right before he got drafted. And the one I really liked was Baker Mayfield with wheels. Ooh. So, again, Baker Mayfield, not the most successful pro quarterback, but you add some running ability, and at minimum in fantasy, you're like, oh, it's kind of an interesting player. Throw in Eric Bieniemy is taking over the offense, finally gets to call play. And don't forget who he's going up against on the other side. Jonathan Gannon, Philadelphia Eagles defensive coordinator, now coaching the Arizona Cardinals. You know, I think most people can still remember how that went between the Kansas City offense and the Eagles Again, the Eagles, the most talented defense in the NFL, how that went for them.
It didn't go
now,
well.
Granted, again, Sam Howell, not Patrick Mahomes, but also you look at this Arizona defensive roster, not exactly the Eagles. This is last season's dead last in completion percentage defense. Only Kansas City gave up more passing scores. And again, this was a team that was bad last year. So it wasn't like Kansas City where they're giving up scores because everyone's in a shootout. This is a bad Cardinals team. And then again, PFF rankings, they had Cardinals secondary this offseason, them 29th and dead last on the defensive line. So I think Sam Howell's going to have time to make plays. I think he's going to run. Probably my biggest fear at this price point is just maybe they get up early so much that he doesn't put up the stats that you're quite hoping for. But at 4,900, I think there's a reasonable chance he's going for that 19 he got last year or more. And so, yeah, at this price point, I love it. And then there's a player that we'll get to that I think you and I would both love to pair him with.
Under 10K stack, my absolute favorite thing in
Yes,
DFS.
absolutely.
Another thing, too, about how I actually think it might be the opposite of what you're thinking, Joe. And if the game gets out of hand, Washington kind of lets him open it up a little bit in a no-lose situation. Just to see what they really have. Moving on to the running backs. I went cheaper than I normally do for my median play because I just think there's a treasure trove of running backs that I like this week in the $5,000 range. But give me Rachaad White, 5,500 at Minnesota. He appears to be the featured back in Tampa, which is obviously good. He finished the season really strong last year, scored double figures in 6 of his last 9 games on DK, mostly sharing touches with Fournette in those games. He averaged just under 14 points per game over his final 6. The Vikings were 13th in rushing yards allowed and yards per carry last season. But the reason I'm all over this, and it's just kind of become my strategy in any PPR league or format, is I'm going to spend on receivers and I'm going to take running backs that I know are going to get easy points and have a high floor. And over his last 6 games last year, he saw 33 targets and had 30 receptions. I think that very easily could continue to start the season. They're going to be without their center, potentially going to be missing a tackle for this game. The quicker Baker has to get rid of the ball, the better that is for White. And then not to mention also the fact that I see them having to get down. I think the Vikings are going to roll. I said that. And again, that's a positive script for White and another guy that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. The Vikings gave up the 19th most rushing touchdowns last year. And I just think this could be a game where White at worst gets 4 to 6 receptions. And you're talking about his absolute lowest, scoring total he could have is probably 7-8 points. But I really think more realistically, it's 12 to 15. I'll take it. Maybe he scores a touchdown. He gets me 20 points at this price point. I am ecstatic.
Yeah. I mean, he's the exact type of running back we love where, hey, if Tampa Bay surprises and they're winning this game, hey, he's the top running back. He'll get the carries. If they're losing the entire game, which will probably be a pretty common thing for Tampa Bay this season, we're getting a lot of receptions. So, yeah, it's when you're in that situation, as long as he isn't just ineffective, he's going to get the ball. He's going to get points. Love it. Somewhat similar. Obviously, this player has another guy breathing down his back when it comes to getting the rushing carries. But I think very safe in the pass game. That's Aaron Jones at 6,300 at the Chicago Bears. 12 games with 3 or more receptions last season. His 4th straight season, finishing as an RB1, assuming you're in a 12-team league because, hey, it's not a real league unless you're in a 12-team league in regular fantasy. But, yeah, so top – and again, he's a little bit older, but I think the thing I like about this generation of older backs, like, yes, you're a little concerned about McCaffrey, Eckler, Aaron Jones. They're not guys who got 300 carries year in, year out. Like Aaron Jones last 4 years, again, top 11 back all 4 years. His average number of carries for the entire season over that time is 205. So he's not getting overused. Dylan takes away some of the rushes, but he's also keeping a guy who's now 29 fresh. I love that, especially at the start of the season. And I think Green Bay is in general going to feed both of those guys more because you're going from Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love. I know my best friend, who is a huge Packers fan, he was constantly frustrated last year. I don't know how accurate this is, but from what he was reading and seeing, he was saying Rodgers was oftentimes opting out of run plays to throw the ball, often ineffectively downfield if you watch the Packers last year. So I think you're going to see a heavier amount of run plays. Again, if they do fall behind, that just means Dylan is staying on the bench and it's all Aaron Jones because he's the receiving back. And then, while I think this Bears team is going to be better this season, there's a long way to go. They gave the second most rushing yards, most rushing touchdowns. And it wasn't just the case of, hey, teams are winning, they're running the ball. They gave up 4.9 yards per carry. This is a bad run defense. Yes, they vastly improved their linebackers, but that's only one part. The defense is still pretty whatever. This is still an elite offensive line in Green Bay. So
the healthiest has been in years.
Right. Super healthy. Bakhtiari's out there. That's always important. So, yeah, you've got, I think, a very smart offensive coordinator and coach, Mike LaFleur. You've got a new QB who they're going to want to lean into the run game and easy completions. All of that leads me to believe Aaron Jones, huge value at 6,300.
Yeah, I love that. Again, the Bears, to your point about the defense, it doesn't help when you trade a top 15 first rounder under their rookie contract, who was a really good player, but that's what they did last year. So not exactly have gotten better on the defense side. I think the offense is going to be a lot better, but I think the Bears still are not going to be able to stop the run. Good reason to pound Jones and Dylan this week. My bargain tier running back, Antonio Gibson. He's 5,200 versus Arizona. Again, this is a simple formula for me. Last year, he averaged 3.9 targets, just over 3 receptions. They had another pass-catching back named J.D. McKissick, who is now gone. He averaged 5 targets and 3.4 receptions last year. So now Gibson is potentially in for the lion's share of a team that, again, was throwing just to those two guys almost 8 times a game, and they were catching around 6.5 passes. His floor, in my opinion, is very, very high. And again, this is DraftKings, PPR. I take those free points all day long. And with the running back, I think it's so risky to spend on a running back if they're not like an Eckler or a CMC where they're going to catch passes, or I guess maybe a Bijan Robinson. Now you can add to that because, man, I mean, for what is he, 5,200? If he gets 10 to 15 points, you're okay. You know what I mean? He did his job. Like, obviously, we'd like him to have more. I don't see any way he doesn't get at least 10 to 15 points. Arizona's going to be one of the worst teams in the league. They're tanking. I mean, they've showed they are already, I think, the first NFL team that's like from the beginning of the season, we're just not trying. We want Caleb Williams. The joke might be on them because Caleb may say, I'm not coming out, but I think that's what they're trying to do. If this game gets out of hand, Brian Robinson is the lead rusher. You can actually see Gibson end up, getting extra carries if it gets too bad out of the way. And again, either way, say Arizona gets up. I don't think it's going to happen, but it could. Pass catching back, it's even better for Gibson. I think he's a really sneaky play this week. I think, for FanDuel, I would be with Robinson, but on DK, Gibson, 5,200, I think 10-15 is easily his floor. And he, just like White, could, with a touchdown, probably score 20, 22 points.
Yeah, I think that is an interesting dynamic there. Because, I think this is also a good Brian Robinson game just because, again, in games where Washington falls behind, Brian Robinson might completely disappear. Whereas I think he's probably seeing minimum 15, maybe 20 carries in this game, even though he'll be splitting time with Gibson. But, the Gibson is clearly the more dynamic of the receiving game back. And I think we could see some interesting things with Bieniemy taking over, because Gibson could do some of that McKinnon stuff that we saw be very effective for Kansas City last season. My bargain tier guy, this is not super complicated. I have like 2 sentences written down in my notes because it's Raheem Mostert. He's 5,400. Jeff Wilson's hurt. Devon Achane is still third on the depth chart. He hasn't shot up.
He's been hurt too.
He's been banged up. Salvin Ahmed is the backup who's, he just kind of hangs around Miami. You're always like, they have 5 backs, and you're like, oh, yeah, he's still there. Because he's just okay. He's like a career 4 yards, like right on 4 yards per carry guy. Mostert's career over the last 6 seasons, he spent all that time either in San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan and McDaniels, because he was there as well, or now in the same offense under McDaniels in Miami. Over that time period, 5.4 yards per carry. Facing the Los Angeles Chargers, who last season were dead last in yards per carry allowed. At
another team we picked on.
So, again, you've got a guy averaging 5.4, a team giving up 5.4 last season, who, again, their biggest additions as far as stopping the run game happened last year. They didn't really add in a whole lot of new guys. I think Eric Kendricks got added in from Minnesota. He's primarily known as a coverage linebacker. So, again, not really fixing the run game part. Dolphins, 6th in rushing attempts last season. Again, McDaniels loves to run the ball. And then Mostert, 5 games with 18 or more points on DK last season. He averaged 17 touches in those games. Wasn't always consistent with the receiving, but had a game in the last month where he caught 8 passes. So he's perfectly capable of racking up the receptions. And again, down the line in a month or two, you're going to have Wilson back. Shane's probably just going to get more experience. And like you said, he's banged up as well. Then this probably goes into the full-on timeshare that we dread in these Shanahan-McDaniels offenses. But right now, it's pretty much just Mostert, and he's only going to cost you $5,400 in a prime matchup for the run game. So I'm all in. He's one of the 2 or 3 guys where I'm just locking them in to every lineup I fill out at this price point.
Absolutely. And I did mean to mention this at the beginning. Me and Joe don't really believe in playing in the big tournaments where you're worried about ownership projection. I feel like if you really want to win money and do well in DFS, you need to be doing cash games, 50-50, single entries, tournament pools with your buddies. And in that case, you just need to make sure you have guys that are going to do well. When you're playing in these, big events, I mean, it's like winning the lottery, honestly, and people are max entry. So if some of you are probably going, well, yeah, everybody's going to have Mostert. I like them. I mean, if you like the guy, and again, you're doing those 50-50 single entries, it's more important getting the pick right than it is for them to be low owned. The receivers, Joe, in the past, we have done very well when we agree on receivers because we do not share our picks until we basically send them to each other. Yeah. I was very excited to see we had 2 of the same receivers. Do you want to take the lead on the median or the bargain?
I'll do the lead on the median, I guess.
All right. Tell me why we both love Godwin versus the Vikings this week at 5,900.
I mean, the simple part is just Chris Godwin, king of consistency. He scored 6.5 points week 1 against Dallas, an absolute disaster for Tampa Bay, which turned out to be kind of predictive of a lot of the season. But they only scored 3 points. He only had 3 receptions. Super depressing. He got hurt, came back week 4, had double digits in DK every single game the rest of the season. Just did not miss. Now, obviously, the 2 big caveats to that, Tom Brady is gone. No doubting that hurts. Even if you're a Baker Mayfield optimist, he's not going to be Tom Brady even at 45 based on what we've seen. And, Byron Leftwich is gone, who was obviously calling a lot of those plays. This team led the league in pass attempts last season. So I don't think he's going to have the same insane consistency this year as last year. But again, if your consistency is always scoring double-digit points, you can lose a little bit and still be fine. And then, I just look at a Vikings defense that I don't believe in at all. I mean, listen, if you're a Giants fan or just a football fan and you watched either the Giants game, but especially that playoff game, this is the best Daniel Jones has looked in his life.
Danny Dimes said, thanks, Minnesota. You helped me get paid.
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend that I watched Daniel Jones play at Duke, but I struggle to believe he had a better game at Duke than he did there. He might not have had a high school game that was that good. He was unstoppable. This team can't cover anybody because, again, we're talking about who are the Giants receivers last year. Isaiah Hodgins was the guy lighting them up. Listen, I like Isaiah Hodgins.
James.
Yeah, but like these are guys who got cut by other teams. Like the Bills were like, we have so many good players, we don't need Isaiah Hodgins. And now we're talking about Chris Godwin. So to me, it doesn't matter it's Baker Mayfield. It doesn't matter that I don't expect them to throw the ball 55 times. Although, again, this could be a team that still is losing games constantly. So I don't think they become run-oriented as much as that Todd Bowles' dream. So, yeah, I think you have Chris Godwin. You have him at under 6,000 against one of the worst defenses in the NFL. I think the Vikings are going to be back here. I think it's because this defense is going to be trash. So, all in, I expect to be picking receivers against the Vikings 4 out of 5 times. Like, they're going to be coming up constantly.
Yeah, that's one of the strategies that we had a lot of success with the last 2 years, is especially once the first 3-4 games happen and there's a real sample size for these defenses and how they do against receivers, how they do against running backs, tight ends. We pound them until basically it changes. And the Vikings, to your point, I told you how many yards the Titans gave up. I'm talking about how much I left Carr and Olave and all those guys this week. The Vikings were that second team. They were right there. Yeah. And what I really like to see was in the only preseason action with Baker and Godwin this year, they played 1 quarter. Baker threw it 6 times. Godwin caught 3 passes on 4 targets for 30 yards and a touchdown. He saw double-digit targets, 9 of 14 games, caught 6 or more passes in 13 of his last 14. And that one other game, he caught 5. So, yes, I'm with you. Love Godwin. I think he's really underpriced. And I'm sure everybody has drafted by now, but if you hadn't, I've been telling people I would much rather have Godwin than Mike Evans this year. All right, we agree on the bargain tier receiver as well. This is another guy that I scooped up in a lot of drafts. Jahan Dotson, 5,000 versus Arizona. I was wrong about him, Joe. I said it last year when we started using him down the stretch. I made fun of Washington for picking him when they did. I felt like it was
I did too.
3 receiver class. And once those guys were gone, what are you doing? Like, you could have waited and got this guy. He made me look silly. He made them look smart. Over his final 5 games, saw 7 targets per, scored 3 touchdowns. Despite, really limited play, was 14 at receiver, 14th in target depth last year, 6th in fantasy points per target. Think about that. 8th in target premium, finished 14th in touchdowns despite being 70th in targets, which is just unreal. And saw double-digit points in 7 of his 11 games with at least a 60% snap share. That will not be an issue this year. He'll be playing over 60% of snaps in every game as long as he's healthy. And then he had an unbelievable preseason. 7 receptions, 106 yards, and a touchdown in basically 3.5 quarters. All of that with Sam Howell. And then, oh, by the way, now Terry McLaurin appears to have turf toe, which anybody who has dealt with that or knows about it, that can linger forever. So that's bad for Washington overall. I hate that for McLaurin, who's a stud. But that's good for Dotson. And I think if that news would have came out and DraftKings hadn't released the pricing so early, there's no way Dotson would be $5,000 in a matchup versus Arizona.
Yeah, I would go so far as because of the turf toe, because otherwise I would not be saying this because I do respect the hell out of Terry McLaurin. I think Dotson is going to finish as the number 1 fantasy receiver for Washington this season. Because I think he, like you said, we were wrong. He looks really good. And yeah, I think that's going to be a problem for probably at least half the season for McLaurin. So all in on Dotson. I think this price point is nuts for me.
And again, with Howell, we didn't talk. I'm sorry, I didn't mention that. 9,900. How often do you get a receiver and a QB that we both kind of like this week for under 10K? You can really build some lineups with that.
Really, for me, Dotson and Mostert are the 2 guys. I'm just slotting them in for one of my running back, one of my receiver slots, and then I'm building the rest of my lineup around it because I just think they're crazy values.
Love it. All right. Tight end, my median, a guy that I am very high on this year. David Njoku, 4,200 versus Cincinnati. Another guy that finished last season really strong, and you need to remember he did not have Watson early in the year. Down the stretch, he saw 28 targets over his last 5 games. Again, those were all with Deshaun Watson. Scored a touchdown in 3 of his last 6. had 3 or more receptions in 11 of 14 games played last year. That's the stat really that gets me. I know you got to remember that was Jacoby Brissett for games. He's involved in this offense. I mean, period. And I think that's only going to increase. As you remember, Deshaun Watson made fantasy relevant tight ends that I'd never heard of in Houston. He finished second last season at tight end and red zone targets despite missing 3 games. That's really impressive. And he's playing a Bengals D that was not good versus tight ends last year, allowed the 7th most receiving yards to tight ends, 7th most points allowed to tight ends from the slot. That is somewhere Njoku lined up almost 10 times a game. And in his 1 game versus Cincy, Watson did start this game last year, 9 targets, 7 receptions, 59 yards and a touchdown. I like Njoku so much. I have him in as a flex in some lineups because of that price, $4,200. And if he is available in your fantasy leagues, go scoop him up and thank me later.
Yeah, another important thing to remember with tight ends is a lot of guys that we kind of think like, I think he's a bust. They end up flourishing down the road. For whatever reason, tight end is often
Jared Cook
position. Yeah, Jared Cook down the line. Evan Ingram last year for the Jags, where I think every Giants fan in the world pretty much hated the guy by the time he left. And then he goes there and it's like, oh, he's pretty good. Like, most drafts, he was like the number 8 tight end this season. So, yeah, sometimes it works out that way. I can't say I'm rooting for the Browns, but I definitely think this is one where it could pay off that they re-signed him because he's a talented guy. There's never been any doubt about it. So I like that. I'm going to just continue to target one of our defenses from last year, and that's the Seattle Seahawks. So that I'm talking about playing Tyler Higbee this week. Higbee, I think a really under the radar guy in just regular fantasy as well, because I think is a very reasonable, assuming Stafford stays healthy, which
what do you mean? Stetson would come in and they'd be fine. Come on, Joe.
Well, you would be the one. If anyone would believe it, it would be you, Georgia fans.
That's right. I believe.
I just look at Higbee. What happened at the start of last season, before everything went off the rails with Stafford and the Rams? Those first 5 weeks, he had 33 receptions for 290 yards in the first 5 weeks. So he's on pace then for over 100 receptions, over 900 yards across the course of the season. And then obviously, look, things fell apart from there. He had one humongous game against Denver where they just smoked Denver, which caused finally the firing of Hackett, where they scored 51 points and he scored 30 on DK. But again, just looking at first month of the season, super productive. His worst game was 8.9 on DK. 4 of the 5 games, he's in double digits. And then, he's playing again, our old friends, like I mentioned, the Seattle Seahawks. Here's the total tight end numbers against Seattle last year. 79 receptions, 1,115 yards, 8 touchdowns.
Sounds like Kyle Pitts' year this year.
Yeah. Good dream. So basically, if you just took the compilation of tight ends against Seattle, that's the second best tight end in the league behind Travis Kelce. That's how bad they were. 79 receptions, which this is probably the one downside to them, is that was kind of more middle of the pack. They were just giving up like 15 yards on average to tight ends, which not always the most athletic guys. But yeah, 31st on DK, an absolute disaster. The average total tight end score against them was 16.7. So again, yikes. Unless you're Travis Kelce, that's a fantastic number. So yeah, and again, I think Seattle, I think that offense is going to still be good this year. They should score points. It sounds like JSN is going to play. So that means they're going to have 3 dynamic wide receivers. I think this Rams defense is going to be really bad because outside of Aaron Donald, there's not a lot going on. Jalen Ramsey is gone. Bobby Wagner, who was there last year, he's gone. There's not a lot of talent back there. So I think Seattle's going to score a lot of points. If Lockett was like $300 cheaper, I might have talked about him for my mid-tier wide receiver. But yeah, that just means Stafford's going to have to launch some passes. And, Cooper Kupp, I don't think he's going to be out there week 1. He might not be out there for the first month.
I don't want to talk about it.
And from a pure just target reception standpoint, I think Tyler Higbee is going to be the number one target until Cooper Kupp comes back. So this is a slam play for me.
All right, we share the bargain tight end in Hurst, 3,000. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this. We're both in on this because we think he's a top 3 target in Carolina. They have a rookie QB. The offensive line doesn't look like it's going to be great. We know rookie QBs target tight ends. It's like that security blanket. Is that kind of what you're thinking too?
Yeah, I think Hayden Hurst he's a capable tight end. Never forget that the Baltimore Ravens drafted him ahead of Lamar Jackson and then traded back up to get Lamar Jackson. And then took Mark Andrews 2 rounds later, who was always the better tight end. But whatever. I don't draft 27-year-olds in the first round, rule to live by. But Hayden Hurst.
Unless their name's Stetson Bennett.
Unless they're a multiple championship winning quarterback. But yeah, Hayden Hurst, for all of my, as insane as I thought it was, they went in the first round back in the day, perfectly fine receiving tight end. And yeah, I don't know what the receiving hierarchy is going to be in Carolina because I don't know if there's a good receiver in Carolina. Maybe Mingo is going to break out down the stretch here or something, but
he had over a 26% target rate in the preseason in snaps with Bryce. He was third, but Bryce basically threw 4 guys.
And yeah, I also, again, looking that up, I think there was optimism prior to the preseason that this was a young offensive line. Maybe, they were going to get better. They looked horrendous in the preseason. So, yeah, I think Bryce is going to have to get the ball out quick. And Hayden Hurst is the most reliable guy to do that. And again, at $3,000, that's nothing.
And tight end is
the lowest I ever spend on anything.
Right.
So, my preference is definitely our 2 mid-tier guys because I think they're in very good situations and much better offenses. But hey, if you need that extra $1,200, $1,300, I think Hayden Hurst, you're going to struggle to do better at 3,000 than Hayden Hurst, who is, again, could be the top targeted guy in this offense early in the season.
Really, really high floor, which is why I'm big on them. All right, the flexes. Boy, am I all in on Chris Olave this year, Joe. Matz.
Yes.
Only 7 receivers had averaged 2.25 yards per route their rookie season. 2 of them happened last year in Olave and Christian Watson. The other 5, pretty good list: Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, OBJ, Jamar Chase, DK Metcalf. They were all top 7 in fantasy at wide receiver the following year. Olave, as a rookie, and a reminder, with Andy Dalton throwing passes to him for a majority of the season at wide receiver, 8th in air yards, 3rd in air yard shares, 4th in deep targets. This is the one I love. 12th in route win rate and 10th in yards per route run. The Saints are without Alvin Kamara. That's also a good thing for Chris Olave because we know they love to throw it to Kamara. I get why they do, but we don't have to worry about this. And they're facing a team that, when I tell you the Titans are bad, me and Joe hammered them the second half last year to very much success. Just over their final 8 games, the Titans allowed 15 different receivers to catch a pass of 28 yards or more. They can't stop anyone, and now they get arguably the best young deep threat in the league. I'd be shocked if Olave doesn't have at least one 30, 40-yard plus reception, and I think he's definitely going to score once, maybe twice. Love, again, the Carr, Olave, Thomas triple stack if you're looking for one this week.
Yeah, I'm as all in as anyone on Olave. I think he's going to be a top 10 wide receiver this year. I think Garrett Wilson's got a ton of hype that he deserves. I think Olave is right there for me. I think both of those guys.
Saints got a much better O-line, too, than the Jets do. Much better.
Yeah, so I absolutely love that pick. For my next guy, I'm going pretty cheap, I guess, for this mid-tier. It's Courtland Sutton. Again, probably would have been hammering Jerry Jeudy a month ago. But, hey, Jerry Jeudy is very unlikely to play. If he plays, I don't expect him to be close to 100%. So Courtland Sutton is easily figuring in as the top wide receiver for this offense. Again, I picked Russell Wilson earlier, so I am in on Sutton here. 2 of his better games last year were against, unsurprisingly, because I just talked about how bad this defense was against the pass, the Las Vegas Raiders. Week 4, 5 receptions on 7 targets. Okay, 52 yards, but a touchdown. And then week 11, another 5 receptions and 80 yards. So 2 double-digit games, which, again, that doesn't sound amazing. It's like, 2 double-digit games. This is an atrocious offense last season.
They couldn't throw the ball for anything.
They couldn't do anything for anything on offense, which is insane. But the super exciting part, too, I think, is Cortland Sutton splits on routes run versus man versus zone. This is from Nathan Jenke of PFF. So last year, his yards per route run, 2.44 against man, which if you don't know, if you're above 2, a good number. 1.31 against zone. So I think that was over the last 2 years. Last year was 2.76 and 1.33. So basically, he's more or less doubling his yardage against man. A player profiler, his win rate versus man was 10th best in the NFL last year. So he kills man. Raiders ran the 4th most man coverage last year. So you have a team that ran a ton of man coverage. You have a guy who kills man. And now you have a coach who can actually scheme you open. So, yes, at 5,200 for a number 1 wide receiver in what I expect to be at least a competent offense now. Yeah, I feel really good about it. Again, I still wish it was Jerry Jeudy because I think he was actually good in this offense last year, in an atrocious offense. Sutton was good against man. So, yeah, they're going to be matchups this year where, again, if they play a zone-heavy team, steer away from Cortland Sutton because I don't trust him in those situations. But if he's playing a man defense, especially one that I don't think has the corners, like if he's playing the Jets and Sauce Gardner, it's like, I don't care if it's man. He's screwed. If against the Raiders, guys.
If you gave Russell Wilson and Cortland Sutton versus the Jets, Joe, I'd be disappointed week 1. I'm not going to lie.
You know, I would either be the biggest genius or the biggest idiot if I did that.
Exactly.
And it would most likely be I would be the idiot. I would be Nathaniel Hackett last season. So there you go.
All right. My bargain tier and this week's Homer Corner. You know I couldn't get out of here without giving you at least one Falcon player. Drake London, 5,400 versus Carolina.
I like it.
He finished the season 2nd in target rate and 14th in points per route at wide receiver, despite playing with one of the worst quarterbacks I've ever seen in Marcus Mariota and a rookie Desmond Ridder making his first 4 starts. Once Ridder started those last 4 games, London really flashed. The biggest thing you need to know about how bad Mariota was last year, the Falcons threw it 6 times more per game with a rookie QB making his first starts than they did with Marcus Mariota during the season. Ridder, I mean, London just completely different receiver. Over those 4 games, he saw an extra 4 targets, 3 extra receptions, 53 more receiving yards per. And I know people are concerned because you got Bijan, you got Pitts coming back. I actually think that helps Drake. You got to remember Drake was doing this last year with literally nobody else to take the defense's attention at all. And in the only preseason drive with all the Falcons guys, I'm talking about all of them, London saw 3 targets. No other receiver saw 2. London and Ridder, they just have a connection. I mean, you can see it. You can hear it in the way they talk about each other. And I think if London has the game that I expect him to this week, this is going to be the cheapest he is this entire season on DK. You got to remember that Carolina does not have Gilmore anymore. They do not have a shutdown corner to put on London. I think he gets off to a great start. He makes Ridder look good. I think Carolina's a bad team. And I think London's in for a big game at 5,400.
Yeah, I was going to say the only reason he wasn't one of my picks is J.C. Horn scares me a little bit because he didn't shadow a lot last year, but you got Ejiro Evero coming over from Denver where he had Patrick Surtain do a lot of following receivers around. So that's my only concern there, but otherwise I'm also very big on Drake London this season. Yeah, I mean, you look up every stat, whether it's him or Pitts, about like off-target throws, which is primarily Mariota's fault. And you just, again, Ridder doesn't have to even be good this year. He has to be like mediocre,
competent,
and don't make people like you Falcons fans hate yourselves while watching them play.
We already hate ourselves for being Falcons fans, Joe.
Well, touche. But yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. This one's super quick. Marvin Mims, 3,000. Again, Jerry Jeudy seems unlikely to. If Jerry Jeudy plays, probably go somewhere else. But even if Jeudy plays, again, I don't think he's 100%. So Mims is at minimum the third wide receiver in this offense, if not the second without Jeudy. Rookie wide receiver. Listen, he runs a 4.38. He's fast as hell. One of the things I always pay attention to when scouting wide receivers, because listen, I'm not a guy who can break down tape. I'm a numbers guy. Look for wide receivers who broke out early in the college career. Because listen, there's plenty of receivers who, they're a 22-year-old senior and now they look good. And they go to the pros and they don't do anything. And then there's guys like Mims who had 600 yards and 9 touchdowns as a true freshman at Oklahoma. Those are guys I want to pay attention to.
He looked explosive in preseason.
God, you give me a guy with that speed. If Russell Wilson, again, the one thing he's always done well, and which they, for whatever reason, seem to go away from last season, that deep ball is beautiful. Like, just think about Tyler Lockett, another relatively small but fast wide receiver. The moon ball touchdowns he had with Russell Wilson. Marvin Mims can be that guy. So, when I was scouring that lower tier of guys where I'm like, who can I get for super cheap? He's the one that stood out to me.
I really like that play. That's really smart. That's why I call you Joe the Brain Matz. All right, defense real quickly. It should be Washington this week. If you're not doing Washington, what are you doing? Remember, these rankings came out like a month ago, the pricing. At that time, we thought Colt McCoy was going to be the starter for Arizona, and
this was a crazy price when you thought Colt McCoy.
Right. What did I called you immediately and said, what is up with Washington's price for week 1? For reference on FanDuel, they're the second most expensive defense. They're 14th on DraftKings.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's unbelievable. They are top 5 in basically everything last year. They were first in success rate versus the pass, 4th against the run, 5th in EPA per play. Washington allowed the fewest first downs and touchdowns in the league to the pass last year, had the 12th most sacks, 6th most pressures that led to sacks, 10th pressure rate. And they're getting a team that is literally tanking. Take Arizona. Yeah. Don't even think about anybody. Take Washington. Be thankful.
Don't take Arizona.
Don't take Arizona. Be thankful that DraftKings put out the pricing so early. I literally have them in every lineup. I never do that. But when you get a value like this, I will.
To your point, if I was just trying to rank these defenses on, if they all cost the same amount of money, the only other one I would consider over them is Baltimore against Houston.
And Baltimore may be shaky on defense.
Yeah, the only reason there is you're getting a rookie on the road first start. Yeah. And at least I always forget it. I forget what the new name of the defensive coordinator took over for Wink last year. That guy, he schemes up some defenses, though, that are going to be hard to read for a rookie QB. But yeah, we might get a rookie QB in the Arizona game. We don't know. Gannon's trying to keep that advantage of not telling us which bad QB he's going to start. But yeah, that Washington pass rush, they were good last year. Chase Young is back. He is playing. Godspeed.
Playing for money too, which is most important.
Godspeed, yeah, that's true. Playing for money. So Godspeed, whoever's a quarterback in Arizona, we might see both of them because one of them might get murdered. My only alternative would be, again, you have to go cheaper. There's no reason you should spend more money. If I'm going super cheap, so I'm going 2,200. I like Tampa Bay against Minnesota. I think most likely Minnesota probably scores a decent number of points in this game. But hey, Tampa Bay's still got a lot of talent on that defense. This is not a team. The offense could completely fall apart this season. That defense was still good last season. They still have a bunch of those guys, especially in the secondary. And I know Kirk Cousins was good pretty much all of last season. And really, he's on a pretty good run over the last few years. But he's still Kirk Cousins. So if I had to go super cheap, for whatever reason, I didn't have that extra $600 to get Washington, I would go Tampa Bay. But I'm with you. I don't think there's going to be any lineups where I don't just say lock in Washington at 2,800 because they should cost at least $1,000 more.
All right, real quickly before we get out of here, Dave Eddy, who is part of this amazing DFS team here at Fantasy Six Pack, was kind enough to send me a showdown lineup. Me and Joe are still trying to learn how to do showdowns. I definitely would not call myself
not perfected it yet.
I'm learning, but I am definitely not an expert. So I appreciate Dave Eddy so much for sending this in. If you are listening and you're curious about it, he's going with Montgomery as his captain. That's 9,900. Like Gibbs, 8,200. Obviously, you got to have Mahomes, 12K. McKinnon, which I really like, with Kelsey being out 5,600. He went with Moore at 4,800 and Raymond for the Lions at 800. You can follow Dave on Twitter at Corporal Eddie, and him and Chris, aka Detroit Beastie, will be here tomorrow for the DFS Den. You need to be sure to check that out, as well as Chris's bottom of the barrel articles that come out every day. Dude is a beast when it comes to just writing, creating content. I am so impressed and humbled. Joe, do you have anything you want to plug real quickly, or do you want to give a prediction for the game? Because I forgot we could do a prediction for each game. Who you got winning? Let's go that way.
I will say I can't go against Kansas City, but I do think we're going to see a Lions cover. I think they keep it close, but let's Kansas City 27-24.
That was such a Joe Matz pick. I'm going to say
they win, but they don't. But the underdog covers.
I'm going to say the Lions, like my Falcons, are a losing franchise. They're going to get smoked. Mahomes is going to be excellent. 34-24 Chiefs. And that's it. We're officially done. We'll be back every Thursday live, leading you right into the game. Me and Joe like to talk, but we are going to do our best to finish before kickoff, because we know nobody's going to be listening at that point anyway. We appreciate your support. Be sure to follow Joe on Twitter at Joe E. That's 2 E's, Matz, and me at Keith Flemming. We'll see you guys soon.